Racial segregation is a deep scar on America. It was built to keep people apart. White people were placed at the top, black people were pushed to the bottom. This was not an accident of history. It was a deliberate, cruel strategy. It shaped lives, communities, and the nation. This system of segregation was not subtle. It was loud and often violent. It was written into laws and enforced by power structures. It dictated where black Americans could live, learn, work, sit, or drink water. The fight against it took immense courage and sacrifice. The story of segregation is one of pain and incredible strength. People refused to accept injustice. They organized, protested, and resisted. Their struggle changed the course of America. The echoes of this fight still resonate today. The past must illuminate our path forward. The roots of segregation run very deep. They are entangled with America's original sin, the enslavement of African people. For centuries, human beings were treated as property. Their labor built wealth for others, and their humanity was brutally denied. This system created a false idea of racial hierarchy. White was deemed superior, black inferior. The Civil War brought an end to slavery, and the 13th Amendment formally abolished it. For a brief time, there was hope during Reconstruction. Black men gained the right to vote and held political office. But this promise was fragile and fleeting. Powerful forces worked to crush this hope, using violence and intimidation. The failure of Reconstruction paved the way for formal segregation. The idea of black inferiority persisted, justifying new forms of oppression. The fight for basic human dignity was far from over. Jim Crow laws began to spread widely in the late 1800s and continued deep into the 20th century. These laws were created by white lawmakers, primarily in southern states, but their influence was nationwide. The purpose was clear and cruel: to separate black people from white people and maintain white superiority. These laws touched every part of life, creating two separate Americas. Schools, buses, restaurants, hotels, water fountains, and restrooms were segregated. The message was constant: you are lesser. The name Jim Crow came from a racist caricature symbolizing dehumanization and ridicule. The Supreme Court gave Jim Crow legal backing in the Plessy v. Ferguson case in 1896. The court ruled separate but equal was constitutional, legitimizing segregation for decades. This was a devastating blow to justice. It gave states a green light to discriminate. The promise of equality after slavery was betrayed. A long, hard struggle lay ahead. The fight for true freedom had to continue. The system aimed to strip black people of their dignity and limit their opportunities. Living under Jim Crow was a daily struggle. Black Americans faced endless indignities and fresh humiliations. Simple acts like riding a bus or finding a place to eat were sources of anxiety. The separate but equal idea was a lie. Facilities for black people were never equal. Schools for black children had fewer resources, and hospitals often refused to treat black patients. This lack of access had life or death consequences. Beyond the laws, social customs enforced segregation. Black people were expected to be deferential, and violating these unwritten rules was dangerous. Physical violence was a constant threat, with lynchings used to enforce white supremacy. The psychological toll was immense, teaching black children they were inferior. Yet, black communities found ways to resist, building their own institutions. Churches, schools, and businesses became havens, fostering resilience and a sense of identity. They nurtured the spirit of defiance. This strength would fuel the coming movement. Resistance to segregation was always present. From the start of Jim Crow, people fought back using many different methods. Some challenged laws in the courts, others organized boycotts, and many practiced daily acts of defiance. These acts, big and small, kept hope alive and laid the groundwork for larger changes. Organizations like the NAACP, founded in 1909, were key. Its lawyers fought segregation in courtrooms, winning important victories. Figures like Ida B. Wells exposed lynching through journalism, and Webb Du Bois advocated for full civil rights. World War II also played a role, with black soldiers fighting for democracy abroad but returning home to segregation. This hypocrisy fueled a new determination for change. Veterans became active in civil rights efforts, demanding the rights they had fought for. The war experience broadened perspectives, making the injustice of Jim Crow harder to ignore. International attention was also growing, with America claiming to be a leader of the free world while practicing racial segregation. This contradiction was used by Cold War rivals, and the pressure for change mounted. Small victories chipped away at the system. Each act of resistance was a spark. These sparks would soon combine. They would ignite a powerful movement. The desire for freedom could not be extinguished. The fight for justice was gaining momentum. The civil rights movement gained new energy in the mid-1950s. One moment became a powerful symbol: Rosa Parks' act of defiance. On December 1, 1955, Rosa Parks sat on a bus in the colored section. When the bus became crowded, the driver told her to give up her seat for a white man. Rosa Parks quietly refused to move and was arrested. Her arrest sent ripples through the community, sparking the Montgomery bus boycott. Black community leaders called for a boycott of city buses, asking black residents not to ride. The boycott required great sacrifice, as most black people relied on buses for work and daily errands. The Montgomery bus boycott began and was incredibly effective from day one. Buses rolled through black neighborhoods nearly empty, with people walking for miles and organizing carpools. The boycott lasted for 381 days, showing the economic power of the black community. It demonstrated the power of nonviolent protest. Rosa Parks' quiet courage had inspired a city, and it was about to inspire a nation. The movement was gaining momentum. The Montgomery bus boycott needed a leader, and a young Baptist minister stepped forward: Martin Luther King Jr. His powerful words inspired people, and his deep faith guided his actions. He believed in justice and equality and became the voice of the boycott. Dr. King advocated for nonviolent resistance, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. He urged protesters to meet violence with peace and hatred with love. Protesters faced threats and violence, and Dr. King's own home was bombed, but they remained committed to nonviolence. Dr. King helped form the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC, in 1957. It aimed to coordinate civil rights activities and use nonviolent tactics to challenge segregation. Dr. King traveled widely, speaking and organizing, bringing national attention to the struggle. His eloquence moved hearts and minds, framing the fight as a moral battle. The Montgomery bus boycott ended in victory when the Supreme Court ruled bus segregation unconstitutional in November 1956. This was a major triumph for the movement, showing that organized, nonviolent protest worked. Martin Luther King Jr. emerged as a national figure, becoming a symbol of hope and change. His journey was just beginning. The civil rights movement grew with sit-ins and freedom rides. Activists faced arrests, beatings, and even death, but their determination did not waver. The call for federal action grew louder. In 1963, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom was planned. On August 28, over 250,000 people gathered in the Capitol. They marched peacefully for their rights. It was a powerful display of unity. The atmosphere was one of hope and determination. Leaders called for an end to injustice. Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech was the highlight. He envisioned a nation where his children would be judged by their character, not skin color. The March on Washington was a turning point, pressuring the government for civil rights legislation. It showed the power of peaceful assembly. The images from that day are iconic, with crowds gathered before the reflecting pool and signs demanding freedom and equality. Despite progress, a key right was still denied: the right to vote for many black Americans, especially in the Deep South. States used various tactics to block them, with literacy tests and poll taxes creating barriers. Intimidation and violence were common. Without the vote, black citizens lacked political power. The fight for voting rights became urgent, and Selma, Alabama, became a focal point. Civil rights activists organized voter registration drives, facing fierce resistance from local authorities. In early 1965, the situation escalated. A peaceful march was planned from Selma to Montgomery, demanding voting rights. On March 7, 1965, the marchers reached the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, where state troopers and local police blocked their path. When the marchers did not disperse, they were attacked. This day became known as Bloody Sunday, with troopers charging into the crowd, beating people with clubs and using tear gas. The nation watched these horrific scenes on television, galvanizing support for voting rights. The civil rights movement achieved major victories. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was historic, outlawing segregation in public places and banning employment discrimination. Then came the Voting Rights Act of 1965, aiming to remove barriers to black voter registration. These laws dismantled legal Jim Crow, hard-won and transformative. The sacrifices of countless individuals made this possible: Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and many others. Their bravery changed America for the better. The movement showed the power of collective action. However, laws alone could not erase deep-seated prejudice. Systemic inequalities persisted, with economic disparities remaining vast. Residential segregation continued, and access to quality education was still unequal. The struggle for true social equality was not over. New challenges emerged, and the fight for justice had to adapt. Today, in 2025, we see the progress made, but we also see the work that still needs to be done. The shadows of segregation have not fully vanished, and racial disparities continue to affect American life. The fight for a truly equal and just America is a journey we must all undertake.